Action in today's movies is pretty underwhelming. The overblown CGI fests are becoming more and more stale, and the fight scenes are still messy, shaky, and poorly structured. But luckily, there are still some out there that champion the fight scene. Marvel's Netflix series Daredevil has some of the best. There are also a lot of foreign movies that are some of my favorite action movies of all time. In this video, I want to break down what a great fight scene is. So this is... For this breakdown, I'm going to be looking at specifically one-on-one fights, so anything that has more than 2 people is out. So in a lot of movies, people view action scenes as being separate from the story scenes. There will be a scene with talking and story, then action and fighting. Story, then action. Story, then action. However, an action scene or fight scene is still a scene that should push either the plot or the characters forward. It can't just be a stopping point in the movie to watch some cool stuff happen. The main scene that we'll be studying is the kitchen fight in The Raid 2. So a great fight scene should act like a tiny short film that tells a story. The fight should ebb and flow and evolve as it goes along. I broke it down into 3 distinct parts. Act 1. Sizing up and fanciness. So in the first part of the fight, it usually begins with both of the characters scoping each other out, or sizing each other up, and seeing how good the opposition is. This sets up the initial pacing of the fight. It should start off a bit slower than the actual fight itself, so when it actually starts, the pace can fluctuate. If the fight starts off super fast at the beginning, the scene has already blown its load. And what I mean by fanciness is anything that would kind of trivialize the fight. For example, a gun would trivialize the fight because, well, this could happen. Or in the case of this scene, it's the fact that while both men are sizing each other up, they're both not taking this fight very seriously, instead treating it like a fighting tournament. Act 2 is about the removal of that fanciness, the tug of war, and new variables. So for the fight to really get underway, all of the fanciness needs to get out. Then the real struggle for power can begin. At this point of the fight is when there's a back and forth in the balance of power. Now, fights are generally more interesting when there's almost an even tug of war. If one side completely dominates the other, all the tension in the scene is lost. That's why not many people enjoyed the fight between Superman and Batman. The fight is broken up into either Batman beating up Superman or vice versa. It would be much more interesting if there was an actual struggle to win. In this kitchen scene, you can see the fight go one way, but right when that happens, the opponent gets the upper hand. That's the back and forth tug of war. And in this section, to keep things interesting, new variables are often introduced to change up the flow of the fight. In the kitchen fight, the new variable is the introduction of weapons. And finally, Act 3, the Animalistic Battle for Survival. So it always starts off fancy, but as time goes on, this fight becomes boiled down to 2 people scrambling for their lives. Almost everything has been put aside besides the aggressive need to live. This is also when one of the 2 fighters starts to get the upper hand and you really start to see that desperation. The Bourne series does this the best. Like in this fight, it's Matt Damon struggling to strangle a guy to death while he fights for his life. Same with this scene. A really bad way to handle the last act is how Revenge of the Sith does the final battle. Instead of becoming more savage, the fight has Obi-Wan and Anakin lava surfing on robots. It just gets silly. Return of the Jedi does this infinitely better with the fight between Luke and Darth Vader. This is the rematch between the 2 of them, so there's a real emotional weight because Luke lost the last time. The fight proceeds through the first 2 acts, and as it's ending, Luke just starts to wail on Vader. You can really see the intensity in his swings. In the kitchen scene, This happens when our protagonist gets a hold of his opponent's weapon. The tide slowly starts to shift over as the ground and walls get more and more bloody until the perfect fight scene. The characters should not look the same at the end of the fight. They shouldn't be the same people when they emerge. Either through exhaustion or perseverance, these characters have changed and evolved. And that's really what I like to see in a great fight scene. Something that changes and flows and communicates to the audience. Thanks for watching.
You